His hand skimmed slowly down my back as I leaned against the bookshelf, heart pounding. Our breath mingled in the dim light of the library, a quiet sanctuary above the chaos of the party below. Laughter, clinking glasses, and soft jazz floated up through the old floorboards. But all I could focus on was Marcus. "She's right downstairs," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The words were more warning than protest, but even as I said them, I found myself pulling him closer. His eyes darkened, gaze locked on mine. "Then we better be quiet," he murmured, his lips brushing mine with the barest hint of contact. A promise, a threat, a question. And I knew in that heartbeat there was no going back. I should have seen it coming. The way Marcus watched me all evening, how his gaze lingered too long, how his casual touches felt deliberate, electric. But I was too caught up in the glamour of Elon's home, too caught up in how my black dress hugged every curve, too caught up in feeling noticed. Ellen had been the perfect host, beaming with pride as she introduced me. "This is Jessica, my right hand, truly." Her smile had been genuine, her trust complete. And yet, her husband's eyes had been saying things all night that his mouth never did, every time Ellen stepped away to greet a guest or refresh a drink. Marcus reappeared, a comment about my dress, a question about work, an excuse to lean in too close. The scent of his cologne stirred something I thought I'd buried long ago. "You look incredible tonight, Jessica," he said once, voice low, almost reverent. It sent a shiver straight through me. "Thank you," I replied, wishing I didn't like the way it made me feel. When he offered to show me Ellen's private art collection, I said yes. I shouldn't have. But I did. The library was quiet, almost sacred walls lined with old books and expensive paintings. "We weren't looking at the art." "Not really, Ellen." "Picked this one up in Paris," Marcus said, motioning vaguely toward a painting. But his eyes were on me. I stood still, suddenly aware of every inch of fabric on my skin, every inch of space between us. When I turned around, he was closer, too close. "Marcus," I began, but I wasn't sure what I meant to say. His hand came up, fingertips brushing my cheek like he was committing it to memory. "I've been watching you all night," he said, voice rough with something I couldn't name. "The way you move, the way you laugh, it's impossible to ignore." I should have stepped back. I should have said something about Ellen, about right and wrong. But I didn't. I leaned into his touch instead. Everything logical inside me shouted to stop. But my body had already made the decision my mind couldn't. "We shouldn't," I whispered, even as my hands curled into his shirt. "We definitely shouldn't," he agreed, drawing closer until my back met the bookshelf. "But I can't stop thinking about you." The confession hung between us, not just desire, but ache, longing. His hand settled at my waist, fingers grazing the silk of my dress, and when his lips finally found mine, it was soft at first, testing, giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. The kiss deepened, slow and searching, like he'd been waiting a long time to do this and didn't want to rush a second of it. His arms wrapped around me, strong and careful. Every touch felt reverent, like I was something fragile and rare. The world outside blurred. The guilt, the danger, the noise of the party faded to a whisper as we lost ourselves in that stolen moment in the space where want overcame reason. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "Are you sure?" he asked, breath uneven. I didn't answer with words. I didn't need to. The look in my eyes said everything. "I ed my face against his shoulder, muffling my cries as the first wave crashed over me. My body clenched around him, pulling him deeper as pleasure radiated through every nerve-ending heffalowed seconds. Later, his own release huttering through him as he pressed his foes against my hair, his breathing gragged and uneven. For a moment, we together, hearts racing. Bodies trembling from the intensity of what we've just shared. Slowly reality began to seep back in the distant sound of slaughter from downstairs. The risk we'd just taken, the impossibility of what had just happened, but as he helped me straighten my dress, as his fingers lingered on my skin while he smoothed down my hair, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. "We should get back," he whispered, though neither of us moved to leave. "Yes," he agreed, but his hands were still on me, thumbs tracing small circles in my arms. "Jessica, this," I know I cut him off softly. "I know what this was, what Etha's to say." He nodded, understanding, passing. Between us, this was stolen a moment of passion that could never be repeated, never be acknowledged in the light of day. But as we made our way back to the party separately, as I rejoined its conversation and he returned to Ellen's side, I caught him watching me again the rest of the evening past Ina Hayes of normally. Ellen complimented me on how radiant I looked, asked if I was enjoying myself. I smiled and nodded, played the part of the grateful employee while hyper-aware of Marcus across room every time our eyes met. I felt an echo of what we'd shared, a secret reel that made my cheeks flush when the party finally wound down. When fellow guests had said their goodbyes, Ellen insisted I stay for a nightcap. Wes sat in the living room. She and Marcus on couch me in the chair across from them and talked about the evening success. "I'm so glad you could make it tonight, Jessica," Ellen said, raising her glass. "You've become such an important part of our lives." The irony of her words, the genuine warmth in her voice, made guilt twist in my stomach. But when I glanced at Marcus, saw the heat still simmering in his eyes, despite his composed exterior, I felt that familiar pull of attraction. "Thank you for including me." I managed my voice steadier than I felt. It was a beautifully refining. Marcus excused himself to check in something in his study, and Elon walked me to the door. She hugged Magudi, thanked me again for coming, told me she'd see me Monday morning. I nodded and smiled, played the part perfectly, all while my body still hummed with the memory of her husband's touch. The drive home was a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. What had I done? How could I face Ellen on Monday, knowing what I'd shared with Marcus Butunderneath? The guilt and confusion was a mething, else a deep satisfaction, a memory of connection that I knew would replay in my mind for days to come. A Monday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a spotlight. I dressed sorely professionally, trying to project the same competent assistant idle ways Ben, but as I walked into the office, as I greeted Ellen with my usual smile and efficiency, I felt like I was wearing a mask. Marcus arrived an hour later for a meeting with Ellen. When he walked past my desk, he nodded politely, said "Good morning" in the same tone he'd always used, but his eyes lingered for just a moment too long, and I felt that familiar flutter of heat in my stomach. Meeting went on as usual, business discussed, decisions made. I took notes, offered input when asked, maintained perfect professionalism, but every time Marcus spoke, every time I had to look at theme to address a point, I remembered through it of his body against mine, the sound of his breathing in my ear whence meeting ended. Ellen walked him Tufts elevator while I stayed behind to organize the notes. They said goodbye with a casual kiss, the easy affection of a long-married couple. But as the elevator doors closed, Marcus caught my through the glass, and the look Wessard was anything but casual. The day continued with meetings and phone calls, reports, and correspondence. Ellen was in an excellent mood, still glowing from the success of her party. She complimented my work, asked my opinion on several matters, treated me with the same respect and trust she always had. But as the afternoon wore on, as I sat at my desk trying to focus on spreadsheets and emails, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted permanently. The script I carried felt heavy, dangerous, like a live wire running just beneath the surface of my professional faculty. In the day Ellen called me into her office. "Jessica, I wanted to thank you again for Saturday night," she said, settling back in her chair. "Marcus mentioned how much he enjoyed talking with you about the art collection." My heart stopped. Did she know? Had he said something? "He thinks you have excellent taste," she continued, seemingly oblivious to my sudden tension. "I might have him show you the rest of the pieces sometime. You have some lovely works in upstairs study." "That sounds wonderful," I managed, my voice carefully controlled. She smiled, then returned to her work, dismissing me with the casual gesture. Sfamayan, who trusted me completely, I walked back to my desk on unsteady. Legs Ed's weight of deception settling deeper into my chest the following weeks, pass it in. A strange rhythm of normally and tension, Ellen continued to treat me. Ass always had with respect, kinnacy and affection, but every interaction felt layered now. Complicated by Thysgrit, I carried Marcus, visited Theophis. Twice more, always professional ways appropriate. But there were moments, a brush of fingers when he handed me documents a lingering. Look, when Ellen stepped out of the room, that reminded me. Of what we'd shared, I told myself it was over. That it had been a moment of weakness. We'd both moved past bed late at night, alone in my apartment. Found myself remembering every detailed taste of his lips, the sound of his breathing, the way he'd whispered. My Nameen, the darkness of the library O'Nevening, as I was preparing to leave the office. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, can't stop thinking about. I'm stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. I should delete its hold, pretend. It never arrived. Instead, I found myself typing back, "We can't do this." His response came immediately, "Ickno, but I had to tell you. I delete bath messages." But the damage was Daneth careful distance. I'd maintained the professional boundaries. I'd belt crumbled with those few simple words. Then, next day, Ellen announced she'd be traveling to New York for a conference, leaving Thursday and returning the following Tuesday. As she outlined the arrangements, asked me to handle certain responsibilities in her absence. I nodded and took notes with perfect professionalism. But all I could think about was that Marcus would be alone Thursday evening. As I sat in my apartment, trying to focus on a book, my phone rang. I knew who it was before I answered. Jessica, his voice was low, careful. Marcus, I closed my eyes, knowing I should hang up, knowing this conversation could only lead to trouble. He left for New York this afternoon. Ickno's silence stretched between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I keep thinking about that night he said finally about you. We can't, I whispered. How? My resolve was already weak and edgy. No, we can't, but that doesn't make it stop. I pressed my hand to my forehead, fighting the pull I felt toward him, toward the promise of connection that had consumed me in that library. Where are you? I asked, the question escaping Bear. I could stop at home alone, Yana. Silence, this one heavier than last. I could come over. I heard myself say the words, seeming to come from someone else. Entirely, you shouldn't to know, but I want you to. That was all it took. Within an hour, I was driving through the familiar streets toward their mansion, my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. This was insane, reckless, the kind of behavior thought could destroy everything I'd worked for. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. Marcus met me at the door, and the moment I saw him, I knew there would be no going back tonight. The careful distance we'd maintained over the past weeks apparated, instantly replaced by some electric tension that had consumed us in the library. He led me inside without words, through the same rooms where Elon's party had taken place. Same staircase we'd climbed that night, but this time there was no crowd bellow, no risk of immediate disclosure. Just us and the weight of what we were about to do in the master bedroom. Had turned to face me, his expression serious and tense. Are you sure about this? Instead of answering, I stepped closer, my hands finding his chest, feeling the familiar warmth beneath his shirt. He captured my lips in a kiss that was deeper, hungrier than our first, without the urgency of potential discovery. We could take our time, explore each other with the attention we both craved. His hands moved over my body with reverent care, memorizing every curve, every response. He lifted me onto the bed. When he settled between my legs with careful attention, I lost myself in the sensation, the connection that felt both forbidden and inevitable. We moved together with a rhythm that seemed natural, predestined. Every touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of joined breath and shared pleasure felt like something we'd been building toward since that first glance across the part afterward. As we lay tangled in sheets that smelled like Ellen's perfume, reality began to creep back in. The magnitude of what we'd done were widden, it settled between us like a heavyweight. I should go. I whispered. They made no move to leave his arm stay. He set his lips against my hair. Just for tonight I should have left, should have. Gathered my clothes and driven home trade to pretend this had never happened at instead I curled closer to him, let meself have this one night of pretending that what we shared could be real, could, more than stolen moments and guilty secrets. I woke before dawn, slipping from his arms while he still slept. The drive home in the early morning light felt like emerging from a dream, beautiful and impossible, and tinged with the knowledge thought it couldn't last. Ellen returned from New York on Tuesday with stories of successful meetings and new connections, seemed energized, happy, full of plans for the future. As she settled back into her routine, she asked about my weekend and thanked me for handling things in her absence. I felt the familiar weight of deception, but there was something else now, something deeper, guilt. What Marcus and I had shared in that bedroom, the connection we discovered, felt too real, too simple. In a way, the careful distance we'd maintained before became impossible to sustain. We began finding excuses to see each other, late meetings that ran past Ellen's departure time, business dinners that turned into intimate conversations, quiet restaurants, phone calls that stretched long into the night, voices low and careful, sharing thoughts and feelings we couldn't express anywhere else. The risk was intoxicating, this secrecy, adding an edge to every interaction, but underneath the excitement was a growing awareness that this couldn't continue indefinitely. Ellen would notice. Eventualism would see us together at the wrong moment, would put the piece together. The end came sooner than expected. Ellen walked into the office early one morning to find Marcus and me standing close together near my desk, hishing on my arm, our heads bent in intimate conversation. The moment she heard, we sprang apart, but it was too late. The bow look in her eyes, the way her expression shifted from surprise to understanding to something harder. Told him she knew. She didn't say anything, then just nodded coolly and walked into her office. But an hour later, she called Maine for what she termed a private tech conversation. How long? She escaped without preamble, her voice careful and controlled. There was no point in pretending since the party. She nodded us if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. I see. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Through it, of revelation settling between us. Finally, she spoke again. I won't pretend this doesn't hurt, Jessica. I trusted you. We trusted both of you. Ellen, I'm sorry. I never meant for. She held up a hand, stopping me. I don't want to hear explanations or apologies. I want to know what happens now. The question hung between us, loaded with implications. E wasn't ready to face what did happen. Now, could I continue working for her, pretending nothing had changed? Could Marcus and I find a way to be together happily? Or would this remain forever a series of stolen moments and guilty secrets? Looking back now, I realized that man in Ellen's office was where everything truly began, not in LuvReal or the bedroom, but in the harsh light of consequence and choice. The passion that had driven Marcus and me together was real, undeniable. But so with complications, it brought what would do in a situation like this, when desire and duty collide, when the heart wants what the mind knows is dangerous. Do you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you'd handle such impossibly circumstances like this story. If it moved you, subscribe for more intimate confessions and turn on notifications bells. Things are about to get even more complicated. Thanks for listening.